So a quick question. How do you think you would fare if you stepped into a boardroom or a meeting room with your team but didn't leave for a month? So you can imagine after a long day, not going home to your family to have a bit of downtime, not having a nice wholesome meal or a hot shower, and not being able to hop into your comfy bed for a continuous night's sleep, because this is the environment of an ocean racing team. Now, I've been interested in leadership and high-performing teams in different environments, and have kind of undertaken a couple of quite unusual experiences, like stepping out into the wilderness alone, day and night, fasting as part of an ancient rites passage process, or kayaking up the Glacier Bay, camping out on the ice with a spiritual teacher in Alaska, and all very interesting. But the real opportunity came when I had a chance to engage with a team that had just signed up to be in the Volvo Ocean Race. Now, this actually really sort of pricked my interest, because in my younger rugby playing days, I actually used to belong to a sailing club, or a less than credible sailing club in Cape Town called the Sea Mongrels. And if you have a look at the picture, you can see that this is more about social sailing than anything to do with professional performance. The Volvo Ocean Race, of course, is a very different story. This is a 45,000 nautical mile race around the world. And it creates a fantastic platform to really analyze and compare high-performing sports teams and business and executive teams. Now, this whole area of business and sport has been around for some time, well documented. But I think where the sporting analogy sometimes falls is in the format or the duration. So sports teams are often their outcomes measured in minutes or hours, but we know for business teams, for your business teams, we have to perform for months and years on end. So the format of the ocean race is actually really interesting, because by the time a team gets together and forms until it hits the finishing line is typically about 18 months, which is probably a closer mirror to the realities of business teams. The other interesting thing is actually the team format of these racing groups, which very much replicate the contemporary organizational structure of businesses today. So if you think about the frontline race team as the business edge, the onshore team as the shared service business functions, and the management team, and the important interplay and dependencies and collaboration necessary for these teams to perform. In this particular team, 23 talented men and women, ages ranging from early 20s to late 40s, 7 different nationalities, but really showing the inherent diversity that we all see in business teams today as well. Businesses obviously operate in highly competitive environments, and this race no less. So what we have here is the actual results of the team that we were following. And one of the things that you will notice is that 6 out of the 9 legs, the winning margin was less than half an hour. In some cases, 3 and 4 minutes, which is actually quite extraordinary. Think about these boats racing around the world for thousands of kilometers and coming in such close proximity. The thing that was really, I think, interesting in terms of this particular research, and it was the first time in the race's history, was the one design concept. So what that actually meant was that every team had exactly the same boat, same technology, same equipment. So the winning criteria now became the team strategy, the team work, and the team leadership. Fantastic, because these are the things that we were really interested to understand and get under the skin of. Furthermore, what we realized, the constant evolution and interplay between these 3 drivers over the period of the race itself. And there we identified 3 key phases: the establishing phase, or the setup, the executing phase when the project went live or the race started, and then the enduring phase, the long plateau of necessary performance in order for these teams to succeed. So it was interesting to notice the dynamics that was happening at each of these different phases through these drivers. In terms of the strategy during the establishing phase, we were actually quite amazed because what we were seeing was more akin to a top business professional team. And here we saw the sporting team analyzing vast amount of data about the route, the ocean currents, the weather, and meticulously simulating that into plans where they broke down the entire leg and knew exactly what they were going to do every step of the way, including expecting the unexpected. So having mitigating strategies in place should their plan not actually unfold. From a teamwork point of view, obviously it's really important for a team like this to get the right composition. And that's true for business teams as well. What these guys were out to try and achieve is what they call the best team fit. So expecting the best, looking for the best, finding the best. But for them, what that actually meant was more than just a bunch of talented people. Because there's a lovely phrase in the rowing world that says the 8 best doesn't make the best 8. So in terms of high-performing teams, there's another level of dynamics or phenomena at play other than just having great talent. So of course, these guys needed great talent, and a lot of the crew that were selected were world champions or Olympic medalists. But they were also looking for the relational compatibility. You know, do I actually like this person? Could I spend an entire month in a boat in confined areas for a year? Could you spend a month with your team in the boardroom, living and having to perform together with some of your colleagues? Furthermore, they were looking for someone with grounded character. Because there's going to be times in the race when you're down in the Southern Ocean, in the roaring 40s, where the International Space Center is closer to you than the closest landmass, that your life might depend on some of these individuals. And lives have been lost in this race. From a leadership point of view, we were quite amazed in terms of discovering a skipper who was incredibly inspirational, visionary, full of purpose and passion. And his purpose was informed by an 8-year odyssey of getting to this point to actually win the race. And his passion was fueling the rest of the team to have the commitment to come alongside and win as well. So spending months of training, preparation, getting the right team together, getting everybody on the same page, they then stepped up onto the start line in Alicante, Spain, for the first 6,500 nautical mile route or race down to Cape Town. It was at this point that we noticed a really important evolutionary shift across these 3 drivers. First of all, from a strategy point of view, we noticed quite a contrast in narrative, what we might hear from a number of business leaders, which tends to be a little bit more bullish and short-term focused. Here we heard Ian, the skipper, and his team using language of consistency, steady as she goes, risk management. It's quite different. And where that had come from is that on a previous campaign, they had a really painful experience of having broken their mast on the very, very first day. So they realized that you can't win early, but you can lose early, and where consistency trumps the fastest. From a team point of view, what we recognize here is that the meticulous recruitment that happened in the establishing phase was now really playing out and paying dividends. Strong bonds, great companionship, great camaraderie, and the guys working in a way that they didn't want to let each other down. From Ian as a leader, we also noticed quite a dramatic shift from someone who was visionary and inspirational to someone now who was actually leading the charge, leading by example, being part of the torturous 4-hour on, 4-hour off watch system, being the first guy down there in the cabin afterwards to wash the dishes. So really leading by example, upholding the high standards and discipline that had been agreed across the team. So at this point, they managed to win the first leg into Cape Town. Fantastic. And fueled by this new confidence, knowing that they were being led by an inspirational and pace-setting leader, the team formed this belief that this was now their race to win. But with 39,000 miles still to go and 8 months ahead of them, in fact, it was just the beginning. So at this point, we noticed another important evolutionary shift. And in terms of the strategy, we noticed this phenomena called POOGI, process of ongoing improvement. Very much like the Team Sky cycling of continuous incremental gains, which smashed out any possibility of complacency. The other element in their strategy was around patience. So despite the fact that the stakes were incredibly high and it was really frustrating for them, they had the discipline to allow critical parts of their strategy to actually unfold. If it needed more time, they actually gave it the time. From a team point of view, and now we're talking about 6-7 months into the race, here we are starting to observe incredibly physically, emotionally, mentally exhausted, fatigued individuals who are having to really dig into their resilience to keep this performance regime going, and also the resolve to keep on fighting. But from a leadership point of view, this was really, really critical now, because the conditions that the leader created, Ian the skipper created, was absolutely essential, because this is where it really mattered. This was now the long plateau of performance that was absolutely critical for final success. And he exhibited amazing dance and almost a fragile balancing act, where at times he had to go back and reach into his inspirational leadership to repump and refuel these guys with determination and conviction to win, but also to continue to uphold the high standards and discipline that was necessary, but furthermore, having the ability to actually come alongside some of the sailors when they were really in their darkest moments and help lift them back up into the critical performance that was required. So rather than one big silver leadership sword, he had multiple arrows in his quiver that he could draw upon. Now, their strategy of consistency had actually played out really well. They were on the podium for the first 6 legs, which actually creates the story where it shifted from this is our race to win to now our race to lose. And that put a huge amount of additional pressure. It really dialed up the pressure on Ian as a leader. And I think it's important that we honor him in terms of his exemplary and agile and versatile leadership that ultimately took them to achieving their vision of winning the race. But it also gave us an opportunity to have a look and an insight into some of the leadership dichotomies and leadership shadow and some of the leadership vulnerabilities. So leadership dichotomy is an example of starting to get too close and matey when you still have to fight the war against complacency, or empowering these incredibly talented people while having to still have enough control to mitigate disaster. Because here we have a picture of one of the other competing teams who hit an island, not a reef, hit an island in the middle of the night, just off Mauritius. So had that team got the tension about managing these dichotomies wrong? In terms of the leadership shadow, bearing in mind that the pressure had dialed up tremendously, we were now starting to notice things like micromanagement, less listening, less inquiring and consulting, being more overcritical, unrealistic expectations starting to be exhibited in the leadership, which definitely dissolved some of the team chemistry. And also then the leadership vulnerability, the self-doubt, the indecision. And Ian Hughes here, I think, is quite telling that even leaders need support. This whole race is an emotional roller coaster. It's full of angst and how you actually manage that. Support, I think everyone just thinks that you don't need it. And the comfort of having someone just to come alongside. So I think the criteria that really allowed this team to perform and win over the sustained period of time was their ability to evolve these 3 interconnected drivers over the period. And the other element of it was that they had a performance coach, Neil. And Neil played a really important role in continuously having an objective view on the team's performance during the race. But when they came into the different ports, Neil was able to come alongside Ian, the skipper, and each of the individual sailors and help them process any of their challenges and issues and personal relationships or anxieties that they had, enable them to get them back up into the zone for the next leg. So what is really critical to get a team that can perform at a high level, at a peak level, but sustain that performance over a long period of time, which is really critical for business team, is the need for business leaders to exhibit what we call evolutionary leadership. Thank you.